right, let me okay, there we are. We are officially live. Beautiful. So welcome. We are here in another very exciting heart-to-heart conversation. Today, we have the honor and pleasure of having Elda Stepp presenting and answering a couple of questions and explaining to us on the topic of anger management. Um, as everyone is kind of logging in and entering the Facebook Live, I just want to first start out by thanking the community. Thank you so much for being here. Feel free to share it with other individuals who might be interested. This is a very important topic, and we have somebody here who's certified in anger resolution therapy. So we have an expert here who can help answer and clarify any doubts or questions. So first, we're going to start off by explaining a little bit. This is going to be a conversation, a presentation. It will not and does not replace a form of counseling or therapy, or it doesn't replace even like an assessment or a consultation. If you believe that you or someone you know may benefit from doing their own individual work, we always recommend, finding a provider with appropriate, a professional provider who can help provide more that one-to-one individual work. And then the other thing is that this is a Facebook Live, so just being mindful that whatever comments are placed there is in that privacy whenever questions are made or comments are made. But we are very grateful. If you have any questions, feel free to add them if you feel comfortable. You have the choice. And then I do want to start by presenting our new addition to the team, and we're very grateful for Elda. So I want to first explain a little bit more about her. Elda Stepp, she is what you call a licensed professional counselor in Texas, and she is also a licensed mental health counselor in New Mexico. So she has a double license, and she is also what you call, like I had mentioned, CART, which stands for Certified Anger Resolution Therapist. She is currently practicing here at Counseling of El Paso as a mental health counselor. Elda's approach is humanistic and empathetic. She understands the importance of being listened to and also receiving guidance. She has her clinical background includes experiences working with individuals who have a history of complex trauma and dual mental health diagnosis. She also understands the complexities of managing anger and different emotions. She is very well versed in the de-escalation of crisis situations and stabilization. She obtained her BS at Park University in Fort Bliss in social psychology, her MA in Webster University in Fort Bliss in mental health counseling. She is currently obtaining her PhD in forensic psychology. She is completing her dissertation research on veterans and how they experience empathy after being exposed to combat. Previously, she worked in a prison setting where she provided anger management services and sex offender treatment in New Mexico. She also has experience working in a halfway house setting where she provided support. Additionally, like I mentioned, anger management and mental health services in El Paso, Texas. So we are beyond delighted and very grateful to have you here, Elda, and presenting and more than presenting, answering questions that maybe we have about anger, maybe some common doubts or misconceptions, and you helping us understanding this complex topic with us today.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I'm going to begin by asking a very simple but also very important question, right? basically, Elda, what is anger and what would it not be anger? Like, what is it not? Mm-hmm.
So anger basically is an emotion, right? And it's like sadness, it's like fear, it's all these natural emotions that we experience in our daily life. Is it bad? No, of course not. It is very humanistic, it is very important, and it's very healthy, right? What is it not? Anger is not aggression. Anger is not explosion. Anger is not any type of other negative and a hurtful type of approach. When we decide and we say, you know what, I'm having an anger issue, it's because there are other things that are probably underlining, that is easier to express through anger. And when we say that we have an anger issue or we have, the inability to manage our anger, right, it can turn into something that is far beyond just an angry emotion. And a lot of times people get really upset, right, because they would rather say, well, I don't want to be angry anymore and I want to take it away and I want to get rid of it. When we say words like that, we're trying to get rid of something that's very healthy, something that's very human, something that is us. We're trying to take away a part of ourselves, a part of our humanity. It's kind of like saying, I don't want to be happy anymore. I want to take that away, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very emotions, all these emotions, especially anger, are as important to provide that type of happiness that we all search for, right? And it's definitely not something that you express through physical reactions such as hitting, such as verbal abuse, any of that. That's definitely not anger. That's something else. That's something much more complex than just being angry.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. So, as you're describing this, it means that it's something fundamental that we have as human beings. And it's like any emotion, it may feel more unpleasant, perhaps in the body and the way we feel, but there's a very clear line too that you're distinguishing. Like, if it's going to hurt somebody else, if it's going to impact somebody else's, like as you were describing, like safety, sense of security, then that's something else and it's far more complex, and that almost sounds like that's where a boundary would be crossed.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because the important part of being angry is being able to recognize, hey, you know what, I am angry, right? Because remember, we get angry at injustices that we experience as human beings. So when we say, well, I don't want to be angry anymore, are we just going to allow these injustices to just take over and control us? Of course not. Right? We have every right to be angry. We have every right to be, wanting to do something about these injustices. And sometimes being angry is the one that pushes us, motivates us. Think of, for example, people that fight for human rights or civil rights or so on and so forth. They are motivated by anger, not aggression, right? Not aggression. Remember, there's the difference between aggression and angry. Anger means, okay, this I don't like. Let's do something about it, something positive, not something negative, right? So yes, it's very important.
Wow, so it's almost like even a fuel for people, a source of empowerment, and then it could do really good too for people. Wow,
Yes,
and
definitely.
distinguishing, it's not aggression.
Exactly.
To advocate or to stand up in situations in those contexts.
Yes, definitely.
Wow, very insightful, Elda. I wanted to ask you also another question that comes up sometimes for individuals. It's like, okay, if anger isn't bad, then when can it become problematic? You touched on it, but if you could elaborate for us just a little bit more, like when could we get in trouble, or when can it become problematic for us?
The moment, excuse me, the moment anger becomes very problematic is when we let it fester. What does this mean? This means when we don't recognize or when we don't, act in a positive way towards something that's causing us anger, right? So we let it fester, we let it sit there, we let it linger, and it starts to eat away at us, right? In a perfect example, let's say, for example, somebody comes and does an injustice to you and you get really angry, but you don't want to express it. You don't want to say anything about it. So you hold it in, right? It doesn't go away. You hold it in. And then somebody else comes and does another injustice. So it kind of just like a building block, right? So it just continues, and it's like a pressure cooker, right? Until finally somebody comes and does something that just, in lack of better sense, it's the straw that broke the camel's back, and then boom, you explode, right? And then you react. You react towards, whether it is explosively or implosively. What does that mean? You either attack somebody else externally, or you attack yourself. And this can be verbal abuse towards yourself, right? I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm doing. I am worthless. Or even self-harm, right? Through drugs, through alcohol, through cutting, through, whatever it is, that we need to start feeling something else other than that anger that has probably been something that's prolonged. So that's when it starts to get dangerous, when we don't recognize, certain things that makes us upset, right? And then, of course, it comes back down to the lack of boundaries, right? When we don't put our boundaries, when we don't respect ourselves enough to put, for example, self-rules, we allow these injustices to just continue to hurt us. And it's a building block, right? It's a pressure cooker that is going to eventually explode. And it can hurt you. It can hurt other people around you. It becomes dangerous, right? And then that's where aggression starts to come into play, right? What causes people to be aggressive? Well, it's probably all of the injustices that they've experienced throughout their lifetime that they weren't able to do anything about. Let's say, for example, a child, right? When a parent minimizes a child's, angry outburst or something that causes them to be upset, and throughout their life, what are they going to do? It's not as if they can attack the parent, right? They can throw a tantrum, they can, do as much as they can, but later on, they recognize that there are certain people that they can attack and certain people that they can't. But then once they are adults, once they're stronger, once they are more willing, right, then they're aggressive towards everybody, right? And then there comes the abuse, whether it is, towards somebody else or towards yourself.
Oh, okay. So, wow. So as you're describing this, it could have an impact externally and even internally. It's some way, somehow, it's going to come out and it's going to be expressed. And the manifestations
exactly
may
right.
be through harming ourselves or harming others. Wow, that's very that's very important to understand. That's a very good point as you're describing that. Yeah. So some real
most
real
definitely.
impacts on ourselves or even on other people, whoever is there. And then even a generalization you described, that if we sort of experience this denial of our emotions over it, and at some point it comes out, it might be generalized to just anybody in any context where we're just expressing anger. Okay.
Yes, exactly right. Yes.
Well, on this note, I want to ask you a little bit too about how would you describe or how would you explain, how does chronic anger affect us physically? How can it affect us physically?
That's a really good question, because I've had people ask me, well, I don't understand how anger can affect me physically, right? Other than me hurting myself, whether it is through cutting, through drug abuse and all these other things. But actually think of anger as like your body's always running, right? What happens when we get angry? Our adrenaline starts to pump, right? It's the same thing when we have fear. Our adrenaline starts to pump because we end up having the fight or flight reaction, right? In our reptilian brain. It's like we either have come across a situation that is threatening. So now what are we going to do? Either we're going to flight, run away, or fight, right? And this is where anger comes into play, right? If I'm going to have to fight, I need that anger to motivate me, right? And however, if we're always running with this adrenaline, if we're always angry, our body's always on adrenaline. Right? That's why sometimes it is even considered that probably people that are angry all the time are probably addicted to their anger, because it's that adrenaline rush, right? It's like I'm always needing to be on the move, and it reaction, and it makes me feel strong and powerful, so on and so forth. However, imagine if you're running for years and years and you never stop. What is that going to do to you? You're going to get tired, right? And your heart is going going to give out on you. It's the same thing with anger, especially chronic anger. So what does chronic anger mean? This means that you've had severe anger issues for the past 10, 20, 30 years, and you are still running on that adrenaline. Anything anybody says, right, will set you up a flame. People around you, you've heard people say, I feel like I have to walk on eggshells when I'm around you because whatever I do, whatever I say, however I look will probably set you off. And that adrenaline is already just pumping and pumping and pumping and pumping. So yes, throughout the years, your heart starts to get tired. So what does this cause? Heart problems, right? High blood pressure because your blood is always, escalating because it always feels like it's in danger, right? And then seizures, migraines, all these other medical issues, your body starts to deteriorate very, very fast with chronic anger. So it has a lot to do with, how it impacts your physicality and your health and your general well-being, right? So chronic anger is not just, suddenly I've been angry for the past few months and that's it. But before that, I wasn't. That's not chronic. Chronic anger is years and years of just pure anger and aggression, right?
Wow. And I really appreciate the metaphor that you used about running because I can picture, after a while running, like, a lifetime of running, like continuously, it's going to have a wear and tear on our joints, on our heart and our lungs. And I can see how it could be taxing on the body and how it could start like impacting it. And I hadn't considered it that way. That is a very good point about using that metaphor about chronic and how it can impact chronic anger can impact ourselves physically.
Yes, most definitely. Okay. And then even with, let's say, for example, you don't experience physical issues, right? It has a big drainage in your mental health, right? Because you can never experience calm, you can never experience peace. So what happens? All these other emotions start to kick in, right? Whether it is sadness and that turns into depression, whether it is fear that turns into anxiety, you're always on that high end. It's like really, really high and then really, really low, and it just doesn't have a balance. And that can cause strain in a person's mental health.
Oh, and now I remember too, also the point that was very important that I didn't know about is that it could even be a form of addiction. And I understand how you were explaining, just like the hormonal impact that it has inside the body. It becomes like your new set point, like feeling like I have to be on edge, on the go, like feeling this pressure to feel, even it almost sounded like functional, motivated to do things, to feel.
Yes, definitely.
Well, what I wanted to ask you, and this was, I think, a very important question, is how would culture affect anger?
Well, that's a really good question too, because we sometimes minimize the fact that our cultures have almost, if not all, almost everything to do with anger, right? Because if we were to measure, right, if let's say we put our emotions up against the wall, right, and we were to judge which one is the weakest and which one is the strongest, right? Which one would be the strongest? It's anger, because we're louder, we're bigger, we are scarier, we're more aggressive when it comes to whatever is we're confronted with. So we set aside all of these other emotions because we live in a society that the bigger, the badder, the scarier you are, the more followers you get. Right. And we see this in any type of, whether it is rally, whether it is even political campaigns, the louder a person is, the more aggressive, the more, stronger they look because of that angry aspect that's coming out, the more followers will probably get. Right. Because they make sense. They speak out of anger. They speak out of heart, per se. Right. So our society has almost everything to do with it because we want to be strong. We don't want to be weak, right? Somebody that's depressed, somebody that's, anxious all the time may sound or may look weak to the society that we are surrounded, right? Sometimes we hear like, well, get out of it or snap out of it. But we don't hear those things when somebody's angry, right? Oh, you need to snap out of it. You need to stop being angry because what happens? The person explodes and we don't want the person to explode. Right? So there's a difference there. So yes, our society has a lot of it to do, especially since we live in a very patriarchal type of society, right? So we need to be angry, we need to be loud, we need to be, scary in order for people to listen to us. Because even if we look at big companies when we're doing job interviews and so on and so forth, who are we most likely to pick? The person that is more aggressive and is more firm, is more, they feel very sure of what they're doing. That's some type of anger even in itself, right? Compared to this person that's probably not showing this type of aggression, right? They're more calm and, they're more collected. It's like, it doesn't sound like this person is strong enough because they're not angry enough. So yes, definitely our culture has taught us and ingrained in us throughout the centuries, right, that being angry is very important.
Oh, almost like it's a reflection of our confidence or our power, or I think maybe even like control, right, of ourselves or situations. Very
exactly
interesting.
Right.
And as you're describing this, it's really not a strong or a weak emotion, right? It's an association. It's the perspective that the culture might have. But what I'm understanding, the way you're describing it, it's an emotion just like any other. And it's not that it's not a reflection of our strength. It's just an emotion.
Exactly.
It's the reflection of
that's all it is.
And it's an intensity. Maybe it varies on intensity, but doesn't reflect, oh, if I'm angry, I'm strong. It's just anger happening.
Exactly right. Because anger, that's all it is. Like kind of like we had talked about earlier, right? Anger is just an emotion. It's just like sadness. It's just like fear. It's all just like happiness, right? It's not strength. It's not weakness either, right? None of the emotions are strength. None of the emotions are weakness. They are emotions, and they are very important for us. Right. So yes, definitely that ideology is totally a myth, that the angrier I am, the louder, the more aggressive, the stronger I look. You may be scary for other people, right? But it doesn't make you strong at all.
That's right.
Yes, definitely.
Yes. Well, what I want to ask you and see what if you can help maybe give some guidance or some suggestions or tips. What would you recommend to individuals who want to help or cope with their anger, maybe in a way that isn't maybe towards themselves or towards others? Let's say they recognize I have an anger issue. It's hard for me to manage my anger, and I don't want to hurt others. I don't want people to be scared of me, but I also don't want to hurt me. I don't want it to go inward. What would you recommend individuals who would like to improve or handle it differently?
So the first thing is congratulations to whoever has come to that point where, you know what, I have an anger management issue. Right? See how I said that? I said anger management. I didn't say an anger out of control that you need to get rid of. That's why it's called anger management. We're not trying to get rid of your anger. We're trying to manage it, right? So I definitely congratulate whoever is saying this, because you understand that the people around you are probably tense. You are probably tense. You probably noticed, something is wrong within my life. I can't experience all these other important emotions because anger is interfering, right? So congratulations to you. You are in the first step of recovery. It may sound very interesting and funny because a lot of times you will say that if you have some type of drug abuse or any type of other addiction, right? Kind of like I had mentioned earlier, it can turn into addiction if, you're always angry because you like that adrenaline rush. The second pointer is definitely get yourself help, right? Definitely go talk to a therapist, because there's probably something else underlining that anger, right? Especially that aggression and that chronic, issue that you're experiencing, because sometimes we wear or we use anger as a mask to diminish and minimize all these other things that we are going through. Kind of like we had explained a little earlier, because we want to look so strong, we're probably experiencing anxiety, we're probably experiencing depression, we're probably experiencing all these other emotions that we've experienced throughout our lifetime. But because they are not strong enough, let me put on the anger mask, right? So I can set everybody aside and set everybody away so that you won't attack me anymore. So there's other underlying issues that you are experiencing, right? And when you get the help and you recognize, hey, it's all these other traumas that you probably experienced, then you start to be able to manage your anger a little more, right? You're like, oh, okay, that explains why I'm so angry. That explains why, I react this way for certain triggers that, you've experienced throughout your day or your lifetime, whatever it may be, right? So definitely get yourself help in that aspect. And, self-help books of reading, learn about anger. What is it? What is it not? What can you do about it? So on and so forth. When you learn and you educate yourself about this emotion, you have a stronger and much better approach when you do get yourself help. So those are definitely the most important things for people that are, struggling with anger, is definitely go get yourself, learn about it and go get yourself help, right?
That's right. And I'm wondering, so let's say somebody has, perhaps they're already doing maybe their work and they want to take it to another step. What are some activities or things that either they can ask themselves from their lifestyle or environment, or even things that they can do on a day to day? What would you suggest, or what are some things that they could do to sort of help their bodies?
One of the things, right, kind of, going back to what I had explained earlier. So what is anger? It's an adrenaline rush. So how can we get rid of that adrenaline? How is it that we can burn that adrenaline, right?
Okay.
We use exercise. The best and most quickest way is exercising, because you burn down all that adrenaline. You're already pumped up. You're already, it's like ready to attack whatever it is. And when you exercise, whether it is running, whether it is sports, right, whether it is weights, whatever it is that, can burn down all that adrenaline, that's a very healthy form of, coping skill when it comes to anger. Right. And it's definitely something I do recommend, especially when somebody has angered you, or you feel like, man, you know what? I'm just feeling so angry at this moment. And I feel like I want to attack somebody, whether it is somebody, a family member, or even yourself, right? Run, go to sports, manage it that way. It's a healthy form of coping skill, right? So that's one way. Another way is, through meditation, right? Self-relaxation. Learn to give yourself time alone if that's what you feel you need, right? Isolate yourself for like 10, 15 minutes to regroup your mind, to regroup your senses, to regroup yourself, right? And this doesn't mean think about what happened. No, on the contrary, think of nothing, because sometimes that's what our mind needs. Yeah, and it'll reduce that adrenaline rush. It'll reduce, that sense of, I want to jump out of my own skin because I'm so angry, right? That's right. Definitely. Aromatherapy also helps for those that like it, right? Not everybody likes it, but that's for those people that like it, that's also very healthy, because if you find a scent that provides you a good form of memory or a sensation of calmness or whatever it is, that's another way to help you, with, meditation and relaxation techniques, and also learn how to take a breath. Because sometimes when we're angry, our breath is like right here, and it almost seems like we can't breathe. It's like, you know what? Sometimes you just need to and let it go. Right? And then it'll reduce that adrenaline very fast.
That is so
those are some
true.
of activities that are very helpful. Yeah.
Yes, that is true. And as you were describing the aroma, I was thinking about me, myself. I think lavender is very, but I think for everyone is very different, their aroma, but that's the one that
Yes.
initially, and I thought it was interesting how I pictured the smell and I almost pictured it in my brain. And just naturally, I was feeling like, a little bit more relaxed or calmer. That is so interesting. So that's a very good point.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, definitely, because you've
walking,
already
running.
trained your brain. Yes, definitely.
Breathing, and it is so true, Elda, as you're describing this. I think that in moments of like anger or any intense emotion, sometimes we will hold our breath. And it's like just allowing that breath to complete itself instead of being held in. That's so
Yes, yes,
true.
definitely.
Well, what I want to ask you now is, so what about the family members? What can family members do for individuals who struggle with anger management? I know that there is that clear line that you were distinguishing between like safe and not being safe. But let's say in situations, in maybe even in both situations where they're not safe and they're safe, but just the environment can feel like, oh, they're mad or upset, but it's not crossing that line, but it's uncomfortable or unpleasant for individuals who are surrounding. What could they do? What would you recommend or suggest for individuals whose family member have anger management um, difficulties?
So looking at, let's say you are in a situation where a family member has anger issues, right? But not once have they ever been aggressive, such as, made the environment so unsafe that you fear for your life, right? Let's look at that first.
Okay.
So if that situation has come up, you have to always remember there is nothing you can do if the other person is not willing. So if the other person denies, that they have a problem or they have an anger issue, there's nothing really you can do, right? Because
Mhm.
the more you tell a person, this is what you have, this is who you are, the angrier the person will get. Because now
Mm.
it's accusatory, right? When we say you have this or you are this, remember, what are we doing when we're pointing fingers or when we're saying you? It's like
Mhm.
we're accusing you of something, right? And
That's
it can be
right.
aggressive, right? It can be a form of aggression, even though you are not trying to be aggressive towards this loved one. It
Mhm.
can be perceived that way, right? And it's
Mm.
learning how to communicate forms of, teaching them, hey, you know what? It sounds like there is a problem. It sounds like, you are struggling with, a certain type of emotion. How about, we find a solution, right?
Mhm.
Involving yourself in whatever it is that they're expressing and they're feeling, and they'll probably come around, right? And they'll say, hey, you know what, you're right. I do feel like, I have a problem. And I definitely recommend, especially if it's for couples, if we're having, like, if it's an issue between couples, get couples counseling, definitely, because the your loved one may have the issue with anger. However, it is also important for you to learn how to communicate and express yourself and learn, right? Because it'll make that union much stronger, much healthier. Communication is key. And how are you going to be able to communicate if you don't know what exactly is going on, right? And
That's
vice
right.
versa with the person that's angry. Let's say, for example, it's a parent, right? And the children are already older and so on and so forth. Definitely family therapy is recommended, right?
Mm.
Or a child, whatever it is. It's always getting involved with their recovery, with their well-being, with, how to manage things, because they are going to need a lot of your help, right? Because sometimes, remember, it's not they go to treatment for, let's say, 6 weeks or even a year, and then boom, there's no anger anymore. That's not how it works. It's a lifetime process. There are things that when they're going to slip, right? And it's important for you to be empathetic, to be compassionate, to be, non-judgmental about this person and communicate and say, hey, you know what? It sounds like there is an issue here. How about we fix it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That's super important when it comes to family members that are experiencing, loved ones that are going through this issue. Always be patient. Always understand that it's not an overnight, you know, a miracle pill that it's just going to make it all go away. There's no such thing. Right?
It's a process.
Exactly. And now, reverting back to a situation that is really dangerous, if you feel that you, in any moment, the moment you wake up, the moment you take your first step, whatever it is, you feel you are in a very dangerous situation because a person next to you is aggressive, is physically abusive, verbally abusive, psychologically abusive, please get out of that situation. There's nothing you can do about it. You need to be safe first, whether it is you and your children or the children, whatever it is, pets, anybody that is in danger, please get help and please remove yourself from that situation, because there's nothing that you can really do. It can get worse, right? And definitely get yourself help. Definitely get yourself, some treatment, because that is very traumatic, right? And
That's right.
I've mentioned a lot of this abuse, whether it is physical, whether it is emotional and psychological. We think of physical, it's hitting somebody or attacking somebody, so on and so forth. What about psychological and verbal and emotional abuse? Verbal, right? It's still aggression. It's still, attacking somebody. But we forget a lot of times that passive aggressive is also aggression, right? The little sarcastic comment, the little, menial comments that are probably not yelling and not, aggressive in some form or other, but they're still very hurtful. Like, man, you look fat today. Or, man, you look stupid. Stupid. Those are passive aggressive aggression.
That's right.
They may not be loud. They might not be, whatever it is, it's still aggression and it's still abuse.
That's right. Even as you were
doing, feel like you are in a,
go ahead. Sorry.
Even if you are in a situation like that, please remove yourself from that situation, because they are not going to change if they don't want to.
That's right. And as you're describing that, I'm wondering if you know of any like resources or maybe even community programs or anything that could be available or individuals have access to if they are in a situation like that.
Definitely, if you feel comfortable enough to call the police, please call the police. Right? I know EHN has the crisis hotline, right? They can help you. The veterans have the hotline. I know the women's shelter, which is the YWCA or the Center Against Sexual Family Violence, also can help. These are all other resources. If you Google them, they will come out, right? And if you, for some reason or other, don't want the police to get involved, there are these crisis hotlines that can help you, that can guide you, right? And make you and get you to a place where you are safe, right? Especially those women that feel, well, I can't leave them because then where am I going to end up? I'm going to end up alone in the streets. That's not true. You're not going to end up in the streets. And there are places that are going to help you. There are places that are going to, provide shelter. If it's not one, it's always another, and so on and so forth. There are these other resources, right? So please definitely, reach out and call and get yourself some type of help.
That's right. And you know what I'll also do is we'll make sure we add to some of those links and resources, even on this feed as well. And what I'm hearing is there is this line that is crossed, and that is somebody's safety. It could be any partner. From my understanding, could be males or even women, either or they. And the other factor too is like safety is very essential, and understanding that if somebody really has aggression, violence, abuse, that it really comes to a point where the priority then doesn't become so much the person who is experiencing it, it becomes the environment, the individual surrounding it, and the number one priority is them and their safety. And then that person can receive help or do whatever it is that they need to do. But when it's becoming abusive, people are not feeling safe, then it's better to leave the situation or change the situation in another form.
Yes.
And then you made a distinction too about like the emotional and psychological effects, where it could be even little microaggressions too. It doesn't have to be these big, loud, but the microaggressions from what you were describing, like my guess would be that over time, it could have an impact on the individuals too. Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely. And it's not, it's not chronic anger, it's not aggression, explosive. No, it's passive aggressive. And we've heard this aggression throw out here and there. Oh, you're being passive aggressive, or I'm very passive aggressive. That's not something you should be proud of. On the contrary, that's something you should be very wary about, because whether it is that you are having the lack of confidence with other people around you, you are taking it out on somebody that's probably weaker than you, or you feel that is weaker than you. And definitely passive aggressive can be very dangerous, right? Because it does a lot of psychological and emotional damage,
right,
especially to children.
Right. And I think as you're describing that from my experience, especially with children, whatever messages they hear, that's going to become their own internal dialogue and even their own views of how they see themselves. So it's very real, the very, very real impacts. So, and then you were also describing if they are in a situation where it's safe enough, but it hasn't crossed those boundaries of aggression. They just sometimes seem irritable, tempered, in a different mood, then just being able to approach them. Hey, I'm observing that it looks like there's a problem. Let's talk about it. Let's see what we can find about it. Sort of facilitating a conversation if we're noticing it, and approaching it more from a compassionate, empathetic versus labeling, like you have this problem and you're this and you're that, because that's only going to instigate more of that response that's already being manifested.
Exactly. And it's all how we communicate. Always remember that the way we communicate is either going to escalate or de-escalate. Right. Yeah. And it's always important, especially, it's one of the things that I've been using a lot. It's my hands and, physical nonverbal communication forms. A lot of times that can come out very aggressive. A lot of times that can help. Right. It just depends. Knowing the person that is angry, how is it that it's easier to approach, right? Mm-hmm. If they feel that it's comfortable to have these nonverbal communication while you're communicating with them, definitely. If not, kind of restricted so that they can feel safe. Remember, they are also not feeling safe at that moment. And when you instigate, or when you label, or you start to accuse, that feeling of non-safety starts to increase, and then they get more aggressive, and it just escalates the situation to a very negative outcome.
That's right. Well, Elda, I want to thank you so much for sharing all of this knowledge with us, with the community. We did have one question. I think it was more of an EMDR technique from one of our viewers. We do offer EMDR techniques. There are different providers. If you are interested in our services, you can call our office. We're Counseling of El Paso at 915-209-1234. And if you're specifically looking for that intervention, you can ask for which providers which providers offer that. But thank you so much. If you'd like to, is there anything else you'd like to share or add before closing today's conversation, Elda?
Actually, it came to my attention, in one of my other sessions. And one of the things I used to use, especially for the halfway house, when I was teaching about emotions, especially anger management, is I definitely and truly recommend, and this is a Pixar movie, and it may sound childish, but it's very, very informative. And as a family, I definitely recommend for everybody to watch it and to recognize it, and to really pay attention. It's called Inside Out, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people have watched it. Yeah. But when you watch it again, pay attention to how each and every emotion is super important, right? It shapes this individual's, lifestyle, how certain things are affected, some certain things are removed and then replaced with something better, something greater, right? Once we acknowledge every single emotion, right?
That's right.
I definitely, especially if you want to learn more about not just anger, but all of these other emotions that are super healthy and super important in our life, definitely recommend that cartoon.
I'll add that even to today's presentation. Oh my goodness. Well, Elda, thank you so much. I want to thank also our viewers, the community. This is from our hearts to yours. We are very grateful that during during this pandemic, and we've been able to still be in touch and engage with the community through the online platform. So thank you so much. Please feel free to share with anybody who may benefit. Maybe not saying you have an anger issue, but hey, I'm learning about this. I'm learning about this, and maybe you might be interested in it, and something like that. But thank you again, and may you have a
Thank you.
lovely day. We'll see you soon. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.